Dr. Beth Moorsley. Thank you for coming for the conversation for Habits by Republica. It's an honor to have you here. I'll go directly into the questions. In your last book, Happy Families, translated in Romanian, Familii Fericite, you talk a lot about the brain house concept.
Yes.
I would like you to tell us what is this concept and how understanding it can help us better support our children.
Great. So the brain house is something that requires a little bit of imagination, but it's a really helpful tool for parents, teachers and children. They love it. You can build a brain house out of Lego with a younger child or draw one on a piece of paper. So the idea is, if you imagine your brain as a house with an upstairs and a downstairs, when we're born, our downstairs brain is where all our emotions live. It's where our survival, fight, flight, freeze live. So it's the part of our brain that alerts us to danger. And it's where our emotions grow and develop. So the downstairs is our feeling, emotional brain. The upstairs is our thinking brain. So it's the part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which sits literally up here, and it's where we do all of our thinking. It's where our language skills are, organizational skills, our ability to empathize with others, to organize ourselves. Between the upstairs and the downstairs, there's a staircase, which is how we communicate between the upstairs and the downstairs. So when we're born, our downstairs brain is very well developed. It's what helps our babies and young children survive. So you think about a baby or a child, they're mostly communicating with us through the downstairs brain by crying or smiling, not using this upstairs brain, because the upstairs brain takes many years to develop. It takes about 24 years to develop. So as our children are growing and developing, we are hoping to build a strong staircase between the upstairs and the downstairs brain, and that's often our job as parents, is helping our children learn to think and feel together. So you have an emotion, and then your upstairs brain makes sense of that emotion and helps you think about what you need to do next.
So 24 years job for a parent.
24-year job for the parent. So I talk in the book about adolescence, and it's often it's around age 10, maybe sometimes younger, because young people are going through puberty earlier, up to the age of 24. So really the thing that's so important to know about the upstairs and the downstairs brain is that when we're overwhelmed or distressed with emotions, that could be excitement, it could be sadness, it could be anger, or it could be fear, so it could be anxiety. The upstairs brain flips off the downstairs brain. The connection in the staircase is lost. So you probably have seen this if you have a young child. If they have a complete meltdown, throw themselves on the floor, it's almost impossible to communicate with them. In that state, they've flipped their lid, and their whole being is caught up with being in the downstairs brain.
What do you recommend to do in such a case? So what shall we do with?
Well, the important thing to know is, if you're flipped your lid because you're distressed, you're experiencing extreme emotions, when the upstairs and downstairs brain are not connected, you can't really engage with conversations. You can't hear what people are telling you. Your logical part of you is gone. And so the more that another person might do, which adds to your distress, the longer your lid is going to stay flipped, the longer you're not going to have that connection between the upstairs and the downstairs brain. What we know is the most effective way to help get the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain reconnected, and that staircase nice and strongly together, is by helping that person feel calm again. to not feel under threat, to not feel overwhelmed. So the way that we can do that is through connecting to that person, and doing that through not what we're saying necessarily, but how we're behaving. So if you think about your own self in a situation where you've been really, really upset and you've turned to somebody for comfort, their body language, they're coming down to your level, they're being in your world and seeing where you're at, is the very thing that will help you feel safe. It will be the thing that will immediately tell your body and your mind, I'm safe. It's soothing. It's like a balm. And in those moments of starting to feel that connection, this person really gets me, then the upstairs brain reconnects with the downstairs brain. And that sense of soothing and safety means that from that place of feeling connected and validated, you then can have the conversations about what needs to happen next, to provide the reassurance or to explain to a child they can't have this thing, but we can do this thing later. I think the challenge for us as parents and teachers is quite often when our own lids are flipped as adults, this happens to all of us, or our children's lids are flipped, we rush to correcting the problem that we're seeing, or telling the child, stop doing that, you need to do this, or you're doing this, that means these are the consequences, you will suffer this, that and the other.
Go to your room.
Exactly. And so that in itself is adding to the flipped lid. And we try to have conversations too early. We try to move to solving problems very quickly as parents. We see our child is upset. We want to deter them from a disaster, from things getting more tricky. So we want to quickly solve the problem and nip it in the bud. But quite often that goes the opposite direction by not doing that initial tiny bit of connection. And it only takes a few seconds sometimes. We are adding to the cycle of distress, and then we're not having the opportunities to actually help build the staircase. So every time you're able to lend your child your upstairs brain by helping soothe them and then talk to them reasonably once they're starting to calm down, you're helping build that connection so that gets stronger and stronger. But if you just respond with don't do that, or telling a child off, or withdrawing from a child in those places, they don't learn to make that connection and start linking the thoughts, the words with the feelings that they're experiencing.
But if we did not do this when our kids were younger, how can we rectify things once the child is older and perhaps windows of opportunities are lost already? So can we do something to help them?
Yes, I often, I work with, as you know, so many young people, and I meet so many teenagers who have missed out on certain important opportunities to develop a strong staircase. And for some young people who might have experienced trauma or difficulties in their childhood, they might have developmental delays, they might be neurodivergent, they might have ADHD or autism. For those young people, it's going to be much harder to develop that staircase because their downstairs brain might be more sensitive and vulnerable, so they're more likely to flip their lids. So they require more care from the adults around them to help build that staircase. So many young people go into tweens and adolescence without that strong staircase. It's kind of evolving and growing over time. So often how I explain it to parents or schools, because this comes up a lot in schools where young people can't regulate themselves, and it comes out in difficult behaviours. Because remember, when your upstairs brain is flipped, you can't learn because your thinking brain is not connected anymore to your downstairs brain. So what I say to families and teachers is, you might have a child who's in an adolescent body, but parts of their brain are behaving a bit more like a 2 or 3 year old. So some of the work you have to do as an adult is to give them a bit more of those things you would have given a 2 or 3 year old. It sounds bizarre, but if you have to do it in a non-patronizing way, but it's something about developing patience and the willingness to sit with a young person who's in distress and help them through that, rather than expecting them to just be able to do that themselves. By doing that as adults, you can help that young person at any point in their life develop that stronger staircase. So it's something about changing your expectations and offering more support to a young person to first feel calmed and understood, and then coaching them onto making the link between their feelings and making sense of that with words.
Do you think there is a link between the crisis, the anger teenagers have, and the thing that they were not listened or cared properly when they were little?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, anger is an important emotion. It's linked
because it's almost like a tantrum when they are a teenager. So I'm looking at my teenage daughter, and sometimes she's doing an anger cries like a tantrum.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think there's a couple of things going on there. So the adolescent brain is reorganizing itself. So the downstairs brain becomes especially sensitive in adolescence. Feelings become way bigger, and they can change very quickly. So you can have a very happy adolescent and then suddenly a raging adolescent with no warning and no sense of where's this come from. And that's because of the way the adolescent brain is changing. And actually adolescent brains are very sensitive to negative social feedback. So being as an adolescent, having a peer group, having relationships with other teenagers is very, very important. It's a survival thing, because if you're not part of a group, if you imagine a group of antelopes, or in this kind of in Africa, if as an adolescent you're no longer near your parents, the idea is the adolescent herd are together. If you're on the outskirts of that herd and a lion comes along, you're going to be picked off. So when you're an adolescent, you have to look like everybody else. You have to be part of the group. So the brain, to help you as an adolescent, take more risks to leave your parents and get out there in the world and develop independence, has a drive to do things that feel more exciting and feel more interesting. And at the same time, it's especially sensitive to any negative social information it gets back. So your teenager will be noticing the tiniest negative feedback that they get from their friendship group, from you, a facial expression that's a bit negative. So their emotions will be much more up and down, and they will feel much more affected by the world around them, particularly if it links to friendships.
So no pressure on us parents.
No, but I think it's important, because as parents we often blame ourselves. We think, my child is angry because they hate me, because I failed them as a parent. But often my child is angry because they're an adolescent teenager and they're struggling to manage these big feelings. It's actually not about me.
It's not, so don't take it too
so
personally.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah, exactly, that was my next question. Because we're losing it, we're yelling, criticizing them. So
the hardest thing for me as a mom, I have 2 sons and a daughter. My daughter is much more fiery and feisty than my sons. She flips her lid a lot more. And it's so hard because it makes me flip my lid. And when I flip my lid, I end up saying things I regret. But it's because I take it so personally. It's because I feel like it's an attack on me as a mother. But actually, often it isn't. It's actually our children or teenagers trying to find their way in the world.
So how do you manage your own anxiety? Because this is very important for us parents as well, to manage our own anxiety regarding how we raise our children?
It's tough because some of this is about the need for control and feeling like you've got control of your children and your teenagers. Some of it's about trying to protect your teenagers from making mistakes and messing up their life. We have a fear, don't we, that they're going to make decisions.
Always.
And they're not going to work hard enough, and then they're never going to have a job, and then they're going to be ruined. You know, we catastrophize and we go for all these worst case scenarios. So I think whenever we are flipping our own lids or stressing or worrying about our children, it's not because we're so worried about exactly what's happening right now. It's because we're terrified about what this means for the future, if that makes sense. So for me as a parent, I'm often having to think about how do I resource myself well enough that I have got the patience and the capacity to not feel attacked or feel like I've failed and then kind of put that back on my daughter. But so what I've relied on hugely throughout parenthood is my cheerleaders. So the people in my life who I feel support me and understand me and believe in me and will be there for me to say, oh, this terrible thing happened with my daughter today and I feel like such a bad mom. And they will pick me up when I'm down. But they'll also call me out. They'll say, well, actually, maybe you did go over the top on that. Maybe you are asking too much.
So a parent needs its own
support
network as a teenager and as younger children. So it's like growing in community still is a good thing to...
Very important, because otherwise it's very lonely and isolating. And actually what you find is, once you're honest about your challenges with your own children or teenagers, other people are honest back. And you start to realize this isn't just happening in my family. This is happening in all the families where things look perfect, you know.
Exactly.
And so then also you're not... I think the fear is, as a parent, is there's something wrong with my child. Probably there's something wrong with my child because I've messed them up. You know?
Exactly. That's a constant fear.
But if you imagine you're having a difficult day and you're at work and your boss is thinking she's having a difficult day because there might be something wrong with her and I've messed her up, that boss's, your manager's behavior towards you will start to make you believe that.
Exactly.
So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if your boss thinks, you know what, you've had a difficult week, you're tired, you haven't had much sleep this week, or you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself because you want to do the best you can do with this project, there's nothing wrong with you. You just deeply care about things. You would feel like there's nothing wrong with me. It's just I care about these things that are making me feel distressed. So there is something contagious about our worry and our fears that there's something wrong with our children. It can make them believe that there's something wrong with them. So I think a big and important part of being a parent is taking a step back, which is really difficult and requires some of that work that you need to do with yourself. And it involves just being more curious about what is going on in my daughter's world. You know, what are the challenges she's facing today? Is it as simple as she had a bad night's sleep and she's really hungry because she doesn't want to eat breakfast today, and that's why she slammed the door in my face or is particularly irritable? And or is it because she's feeling a lot of pressure to do well at school and it just feels too much? Or has she fallen out with a friend? Or is she really in love with a boy who's not showing her any interest, you know? Or so I think there's so many reasons we might be struggling in a particular day. And I think stepping back and developing that curiosity, stepping into your child's shoes more, thinking what's their experience of life and the world, and from that place you can help them make sense of how they're feeling, rather than panic that my child is something wrong, their future's ruined, everything's over with and it's all my fault.
That's very, very interesting and very important, just to tell to all the parents that after all, if we think something, it might be a self-prophecy. It happens in our lives as well. You emphasize in your book the importance of validating emotions. Could you share some practical advices on how parents can effectively validate and respond to their children's feelings? And also, shall we go unconditional in validating their emotions?
This is such a tricky thing because sometimes our children's emotions create havoc, that they hurt other people, they damage things, they lead to consequences, which we're, again, if we're thinking about the world, we're thinking, well, if you did this when you were an adult, you'd end up in prison, you know, because you're disobeying the societal rules, or you'd be ostracized from your group of your work colleagues. So I think it's really difficult for us when our children's emotions lead to behaviors that we do not like or cause distress in us or other people. And that can then feel very difficult to validate those emotions. So I'll give you an example. My son had a fight at school because he was very angry about something. And when he came home, I heard a call from the school to tell me he'd hurt another child, he'd hit another child. And he came back from school and he was very distressed, and he was never going back to school again. And this is really difficult for me. You know, the shame of school phoning me to say my child has hurt another child. I'm immediately enraged myself. Why have you done this? Is my thoughts. You should never hit another person are my thoughts. But when I chose the time to have a conversation, we played a game of cards together, so it was low key, because it's very important to think about when you talk to your children about difficult things, because if their lid is flipped or they're stressed out, you can't have a good conversation. So when he said, I'm not going to school tomorrow, Mom, I'm never going back to school again. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because, you know, this terrible thing happened and I hate this person and I'm so angry. And so I had to validate his emotions, but more by naming them. It sounds like you were really angry today. It sounds like guessing a bit, being curious, not presuming I know. So you're kind of validating through trying to put words to the feelings that young person might have and tie a kind of making sense of it. Did this person hurt you? Were you angry because something unfair happened? And so by kind of helping a young person make sense of, I was angry because this person came and disrupted our game of football, and they wouldn't stop disrupting our game of football. And that made me feel angry because it was unfair for this person to do this. And they hurt one of my other friends, not physically, but they took the ball away and it was their ball, it's their important ball. I felt angry because it was unfair. So by me being curious and saying, I'm guessing you were really angry if you hit this boy. What could have made you so angry? And then he tells me the story. That sounds like you were feeling like it was really unfair. Yes, it was. And then we were able to move on. When he felt validated, understood, Mom gets it. I felt like this was unfair. We were then able to think about, well, what did you do to that boy when you hurt him? Did you do something that was true to what you think about friendship is? You know, friendship to me is about loyalty and being kind to others, he told me. And he was like, well, no, I didn't. I lost control and I'm ashamed of that. He was then able to get to explain, I feel bad about that too. Which makes me feel angrier that I now feel bad about it, you know? So there's something about how do you help describe your child's experience without condoning it, without saying you've done the right thing here. Because I think that's your fear as a parent, is if you validate their feelings, you're going to be almost validating their behavior and saying, well, it's okay, it's a good excuse, I get it. But
so you're understanding the feeling, but not always validating the behavior.
Exactly. So making sense of the behavior in the context of the feeling. And that's an important thing to do for your child.
For the child.
And then you can think about what could you have done instead to honour what's important to you. Well, I could have got a teacher and I could have told them
instead of hitting
him. And then what we worked out through this conversation, it didn't take very long, it was a short conversation, is that for him, a sense of belonging and being part of a group and loyal friends are so important to him. So we were then able to think, well, what do you need to do next? If you do never go back to school and you never see your friends again, how is that going to make you feel? Well, it's going to make me feel terrible, because actually I've just worked out that the reason this happened is because friendship and loyalty is so important to me. So what do you think you need to do if you're going to, get back to what's important to you? And my son was only 9 when we had this conversation. He said, well, I need to go back to school and I probably need to say sorry.
So it's also a trusting process between the parent and the kid.
It's believing they know the answer. He came to the conclusion. I didn't tell him, you need to go back to school and you need to say sorry.
And you will go to school.
Yeah.
And you will say, I'm sorry, and that's it.
Yeah,
no
it's like coaching your child into understanding themselves better, not seeing themselves as a terrible person. Because if you will go back, you will apologize, you shouldn't have done that. You're a terrible person, you're a terrible person. Actually, he's a person who deeply cares about friendship and loyalty. He betrayed that by hitting this boy. But if he continues to feel like a terrible person, he won't.
Will hit next time. He will hit again.
He will hit again. He will start to believe that he's a terrible person instead of understanding he's actually a person who deeply cares about important things.
He will never do it again.
So he will now. He went back to school and he did genuinely apologize to the boy, and he thought about how, I'm a good friend, I'm a loyal friend, I'm not a terrible kid who's got a problem with anger.
Yeah, but also this brings another question, because you said when the school called you, you were very angry.
I was.
So how do we deal with our own anger? So what techniques do you use for anger management? Because sometimes we get really angry on our kids. So what do you recommend for us parents to do in such cases?
Well, get good at noticing this in yourself. The flipped lid analogy is really helpful. This is triggering me. This is flipping my lid. For me, it's really embarrassing. Look, I've got this job. I'm a psychologist. I work with kids. My kids hitting other kids. This is really triggering for me.
I can imagine.
So noticing the feeling in my body, noticing the physical sensations, when we start to get triggered, we feel it in our body. I get a hot face. My heart starts to beat. I feel this kind of rage bubbling away. When I notice that, I know I need to take a step away. The phone call, I don't run straight to my son and go, da, 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 which is what I want to do, because I want to solve the problem. I want to get it over with now. I want him to never do this again. I take it back. I've learned, I have to learn, I have to keep doing it. It's really hard to take a step back, to take 1 minute, to breathe, to think, okay, I've got to own my stuff here. And I've got to think about the longer term, bigger picture. I have had to learn what helps me recharge my batteries, what helps me keep perspective, what helps me not lose the plot. And I have to explain that to my children too, so they know me better. Like, I need to just take a couple of minutes here, because if I don't, I'm going to say some things I don't mean to say, but I will come back to this. It's not that I don't care that I'm stepping away. My daughter hates it if I step away to recompose myself, because she views it as me not caring about her or not caring about the situation. So I call it broadcasting. I let my children know, I'm feeling like I'm about to flip my lid. I just need a few minutes to take a few deep breaths and then come back to this. And my children now know I will come back to it, and it will all work out better for them. And it gives them permission to say, Mom, I just need some space right now, because I can feel myself losing it. So you're kind of modeling to your children, you're kind of explaining, you're helping build the connection between the upstairs and the downstairs brain, that knowledge, understanding myself.
So it's very important to talk with our kids about this flipping and the disconnection
Yeah.
between the upper and downstairs. So
brain.
it's really important to talk
Educate them, yeah.
and to educate them. In your book, you talk about the early signs of mental health, and you mentioned that 75% of mental health issues start before 24 years old and 50 before 15 years old. But sometimes between this age range, there is a distance growing between parents and their children.
It's difficult. It's
difficult.
sad as a
yeah,
parent.
what
isn't
can
it?
we do to overcome this gap? I mean, it might affect the whole life of a parent and children if we don't do the right thing during this age range.
Just one thing to say before I answer this question that I think it's so important for parents to know. I think there's a fear that if you don't get it right all of the time, you've ruined it. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can't get it right all of the time. To be a perfect parent would not be a good thing for your child, because you'd be setting them up for a world of disappointment. They would go into life and be constantly unable to manage other relationships because they'd be expecting perfection.
Mm-hmm.
So the important thing to know is we don't have to do a lot of the things I talk about in my book. You can build it, they're good habits you can build into your life, but they're not things you have to do absolutely every single time. They're just things you need to do some of the time. And it's the same as we go through childhood and adolescence. There will be times where we have difficulties in our relationships with our children, and there'll be times when things go better. It's like a wave, and it's to not panic that when things are tricky they'll never be good again, and believe that if you maintain that consistent sense for your child that you love them, you accept them, that you want to spend time with them, they will always come back to you. And that's really hard when your children are moving away from you, rebelling maybe just wanting some space and distance. It's very natural for an adolescent to want space and distance. And depending on how you feel about that, whether you want to kind of pull them in close or you see it as a form of rejection and you push them away. But the key is to maintain a consistent interest, a curious and non-judgmental interest. Now, it's very difficult with adolescents now because they've got such an interesting and exciting world outside of us, and technology gives them access to so much stimulation and connection with others. So we're having to compete with that, which is really tough. And we might feel like we just want to give up on maintaining that connection. But what I would advocate for any parent is, during adolescence, you might not be so approving of some of the interests that your child has. You might not understand those interests, but show an interest in them, and that's your connection point. That's your interest that will enable. So show an interest in the stuff your kid cares about, even if you don't care about it, because they will love that more than anything. I'm telling you, you know, simple things like a lot of our kids are on their gaming at the moment, or they're on TikTok, or they're on their social media feeds. And you think, this is really bad. I don't like this. This isn't what I had as a child. This is meaning there's a disconnect between me and my child, because I'm the same on my phone. This creates a disconnect. And it's kind of counterintuitive in a way, because you think if you're going to show an interest in that, you're condoning it, you're encouraging it. But what I have found is showing interest in my daughter's TikTok world and what she's interested in. She's massively interested in makeup and things like that. Has really enabled me to have a connection with her. I got her to do my makeup one day. I said, please, can you she wears false eyelashes. She's only 15, but she wears them, you know, for fun. And I said, can you put the eyelashes on me and see what I look like? It was the most wonderful moments with my daughter. We were very close to one another physically, which you lose that physical distance with your teenager. It was such a simple thing. And she initially said, oh, don't be silly, Mom, you won't like it. And I said, no, I really will. And then I let her do my eyebrows and my eyelashes. And it was such a touching, she wouldn't have known that, but for me it was so moving to be so close to her. And then at the end, she was showing all her friends on TikTok, look, or her Snapchat. And it was, we had that closeness and connection because I showed an interest and I validated what was important to her, meant so much to her, and it brought us back together. And we ended up having an argument later that day, but that closeness just made it feel like we do deeply care about one another. And
the argument is not even so important after all.
And the argument is just part of our life, you know. Rupture in relationships is part of life. The important thing is repair. That, you know, after you've had that fallout with your child, after you've said the things you didn't mean to say, you go to them and you say sorry. You own it. Such a
valuable tip for social media, because this was obviously a question how to approach social media. So being interested in
and my son is 11. He plays all these games with his friends. He loves it, and he wants me to watch him play. And I'm like, oh, should I watch him play? I don't want to encourage him to be a gaming more. But that's ridiculous. I mean, he loves that gaming whether I encourage him or not. That ship has sailed. He loves gaming. My daughter loves TikTok. Me not liking it, it's going to probably make them like it more, not less. Exactly. So by sitting there and watching him play, I start to see, actually, this isn't as bad as I thought. He's having so much fun. He's talking to all of his friends. He's working hard to achieve a goal. And so not only do I have an insight into his world and give him a sense of, Mum's interested in me. She's interested in this. She cares about this. It also helps me understand him better and why he's interested in that world. So I am not so disparaging and critical and judgmental, which actually means if something happens on TikTok for my daughter or with her friends or my son, they can come to me and not be afraid that I'm going to take that thing away. I'm not going to say, I told you gaming's so bad for you. I told you you shouldn't be on the internet because you've seen something you really didn't want to see. I hate that feeling.
Because otherwise they will process the information by themselves and they will not know how to deal with being excluded or I don't know other or
they'll be scared to tell you because they think you're just going to say, yes, I told you so. These things are bad for you. And children say they don't want, they understand these things are bad and they understand it's addictive, but they love the things that give them something positive. So they don't want this thing to be taken away. So if your child knows you can see the positives and you can see the negatives, they will come to you instead of going to another teenager for advice and help, who's not going to give them such wise help. They might send them in a tricky direction, or who may go online. We know that children are going online to answer questions about anything to do with health, to do with depression, to do with anything they're feeling. They won't come to you. They will go online for it. And you can't prevent that unless you give your child no access to technology. But that is, as a teenager, that's an almost impossible thing to do. So if you want your child to have conversations and believe that they can tell you tough, difficult stuff, because they will be seeing tough, difficult stuff online, then they have to believe that you're not going to be in a very black and white place about this, that you're willing to be open to talk and make sense of it with them.
And to understand their world. I mean, they live in this world today, so we can't
change that. The genie's out of the bottle. And it might distress us and it might annoy us and it might frustrate us, but it's a fact, it's there. So if we want to hold on to our kids, then we have to be interested in them, and we have to show them that we are willing to care about their world and the things they care about and help them develop balance.
Exactly. Even on their TikTok nonsenses for us, for example.
Yeah, they are nonsense for us,
but for them
it's a matter of life and death. It's their world. And if we invalidate that, then we're not giving ourselves an opportunity to connect with them and then help use some of our wisdom from hopefully we've years of knowledge to help balance out some of the things that they might get pulled into, or some of the extreme ways of thinking they might get sucked into, because social media has got quite extreme positions, hasn't it, to make it attractive. So we want to help give our children balance, and we won't do that by being the extreme polar opposite.
because basically if we are extreme, we just do what
push them
exactly
to the other extreme, because
exactly.
they'll fight
it's
against it.
It's the same thing that social media does, but we do it for them.
So it's learning the art of holding on to your own emotional response to create space for something new. And you know what? You will find out new things. The conversations I've been able to have with my teenagers, my eldest son is 19 now, have taught me stuff about life, about the world, different ways of, different perspectives that I had quite a view on or hadn't even thought about. So when our children go into adolescence and young adulthood, if we're freeing ourselves up to learn from them, we actually build so much stronger relationships, and we grow and develop ourselves. And that's a wonderful thing for your child or adolescent to believe, that they're having an influence on the world, on you. They're, you know, they have some power. You know, I think young people are feeling very helpless and hopeless about themselves and their future. And
because of the whole things going on in the world. I mean,
and everything they're reading and seeing is telling them, you're an anxious generation, you're a snowflake generation, you're all messed up, you're all, what, you know, so negative. And then our parents are panicking about that too. There's something wrong with you, you're not willing to, you know.
So after all, you will start believing that something is wrong with you, and then anxiety comes. And you talk extensively in your book about physical manifestation of anxiety. And you're noting that often anxiety impacts the body before it comes out in behavior and before we can say it's anxiety. So could you detail the physical signs of anxiety in children?
Yes. So I talk about it as the stress response in my book. And essentially, when we experience stress, again, it's in the downstairs brain, which is a very automatic part of our brain. Things happen very, very quickly, which is why it happens before we even know it. And that's because the whole point of this is fight or flight. It needs our bodies to act very quickly to escape any danger. So what happens is when we experience that shot of adrenaline and cortisol, it fires our body up to move very quickly or fight something, have the strength to fight something, which makes our heart beat quickly. It makes our breathing get faster. So normal breathing for a child is 6 to 7 breaths a minute, or an adult. When you're stressed, it can go up to 50 breaths a minute. Oh, wow. So that's a big physiological change. So we're breathing more quickly. We tense our muscles because we're ready to fight or run. The hairs on our body stand on end to help cool us down. Our blood gets diverted to our muscles away from our digestive system so that we can use our body to run or fight, which is where you get that sensation of butterflies in your tummy or feeling sick, feeling nauseous, feeling like you don't want to eat anything. Lots of young people who struggle with stress or anxiety over prolonged periods develop problems with digestion. They might lose their appetite, or they might find it really difficult to go to the toilet. They might need the toilet more all the time, or they might find that they don't need the toilet enough. And that's because the blood in our body is being diverted away from our digestive system to our muscles. So these physical sensations, you might see your legs tremoring if you've been anxious. Have you ever noticed your hands shaking? We get tunnel vision. We notice very few things, and that's because we're just trying to focus on noticing the threat. We might find ourselves getting headaches and neck and backache because we're tensing our muscles up. Now, so often we are doing these things without even noticing we're doing them. We are finding, I meet with children all the time, and they're sitting with me in clinic like this, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to ask you to do something. I just want you to shake yourself out like a rag doll, And it's like, that's such a weird feeling for them, because they spend their whole body tensing their muscles, tensing their stomach, holding on, because they're so used to having that stress in their body. So the key thing I talk about in my book is we can't tell with our upstairs brain, we can't tell our heart to slow down. The one thing we can control when we have been overwhelmed with these physical feelings of anxiety is our breath, because we can slow our breath down. So a lot of the work I do with children is helping them understand that a lot of the physical feelings they have when they're anxious are not that they're ill. So lots of children will describe feeling ill, feeling sick, and it will be experienced as a physical illness rather than a sensation of linked to anxiety. So I explain to children what's happening in their body, and I have a picture in the book that parents can do that with. I explain about the caveman, the fight-flight response.
Exactly.
So they understand why. And of course, the thing is, most of the time we're feeling anxious in modern day life, we're having to sit very still. Children in school feeling anxious about an exam. Are they going to be able to run out of the exam hall or hit their teacher and get rid of all this adrenaline and cortisol and kind of correct the imbalance in their body? No, we're going to ask them to sit still and not move, which is the last thing the body wants to do. So what I help young people do is a couple of things. One of them is learn to notice these sensations in their body earlier, so they can start to take control of them. There's two things they can do. One is slow their breathing down. So I get young people to practice learning how to slow breathe when they're not stressed, because they need to practice that when they're not stressed, because it's very difficult to do when you're stressed. Yeah. Just like anything, just like playing a musical instrument. If you're learning a new piece on the piano and I put you in front of 1,000 people to play that new piece, you're going to be dug, 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 dug. But if I give you time to practice in a low stress situation, when you sit in front of those 1,000 people, you'll be able to do it. It's the same with breathing. So giving your child or helping your child learn to practice this every day, just in for 4, out for 8, keep it simple. Then when they notice these physical feelings, they can say, okay, I can slow my breathing down. And then their brains are rushing to worst case scenarios, what ifs. Oh no, this feeling I'm feeling in my body is predicting something terrible is going to happen. And then their brain is making the physical sensation get bigger and bigger. So what I also help young people do is learn to self-soothe their brain. My body is telling me there's danger, but there isn't danger. It's okay, I'm safe. Okay, I'm worried about this test, but this test isn't going to eat me. I'm okay, I've got this. And so the body and the brain are starting to realize this is a false alarm. I'm not going to die, because the reaction is as if you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. I'm not going to die. Okay, I am worried about not doing well in this test, but if I let this anxiety take over, I'm not going to do well in this test. Anxiety is not helping me in this moment. It's making things worse for me. So I'm going to slow my breathing down. I'm going to let myself know I'm okay, I'm safe. And then what will happen is you'll start to turn the stress response off.
But there are things we can do at home with our kids. Even in your book you give some examples. But when should we address a specialist, a therapist? I mean, when should we go to and ask for help? When it's too much?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because most parents are wanting to see me to check out, is there something wrong with my child? Do I need help? Am I not doing a good enough job to support my child? And the thing that we're always looking at when in my role is at work is how much of an effect is this anxiety or low mood having on a young person's life? Is it stopping them do the things that are important to them? Have they stopped spending time with their friends? Have they stopped playing football, which they love or used to love? So it's thinking about the impact of that on your child's life. Is it shutting your child's life down? Is that happening just at home, but they're fine at school? That's less of a worry. But if it's happening at school and it's happening at home and it's also affecting their social relationships outside of home, then that's more to worry about. how long has it been going on for? Is this just something that's happened this week, or has this been going on for weeks? Is this linked to something that's happened? Maybe you've had a loss in the family, maybe a grandparent has died. Well, that makes sense in the context of the grandparent dying, that your child would be feeling sad and low for a period of time. But has that gone on for so long now that it's less about what's happened, but it's more of a pattern? They've got stuck in that low mood and that sadness and found it really difficult to come out of. So in the book, I talk about the Wellbeing Abacus, and that's a really helpful tool to try and understand what's happening in my child's life, how is it affecting them across their relationships, sleeping. So if you're seeing your child's really struggling with sleep, eating, has your child's food patterns changed? Are they eating less? Are they eating more? Have they less energy? Are they not doing the things they used to do with regard to physical activity? Is this affecting their learning? Are they now not able to concentrate at school? Is it meaning that they're never able to enjoy the moment? They're constantly fretting about something that's already happened or something that may be happening. And are you finding it's really hard to noticing them being able to give to others or feel connected to others?
Then we have to...
And then that's when you're thinking, whatever is happening for my child, their distress is beginning to shut down their world and their ability to connect with and be part of the world. So it's affecting their body, it's affecting their sleep, it's affecting their appetite, it's affecting their relationships, and it's affecting their ability to learn. And so I think when you can see that's happening, then that's the time to think about asking for more help.
In extreme cases of addictions, drug addictions, self-harm, eating disorder, gambling, what is the first thing a parent should...
The first thing you can do is take a deep breath. Give yourself a hug. These are the most painful things for you to experience as a parent, your child being hurt, and then realizing that your child's distress is so big that it's led to them actively hurting themselves. So it's something about being able to show yourself some self-compassion first before you think about how you're going to respond to a child. But the key thing is, for your child, what they need is your love and your acceptance. They don't need your anger. They don't need your shame. They need you to just be with them within their distress and be able to tolerate that. That's a really tough thing to do. But if you take it away, and in my book, I do talk about self-harm, and I think it's a really helpful chapter because it helps parents understand that self-harm is effective in soothing a young person because it produces endorphins that immediately make a young person feel like they're in less emotional pain. So if you understand that, you can see that it makes more sense. But it's so difficult. And I think the feeling you want to give your child when this has happened is not, not a feeling of, this is too much, this is unbearable. It's of, I'm so sorry you're in this much distress, and I want to help. We want to find a way together to help. And I think that's the feeling we want to leave with childhood. We're in this together. We can do this together, rather than, I don't get this. This hurts me. This hurts me. That's what I think sometimes. That would and that creates more pressure and more shame. And young people will often tell me that they've self-harmed, and I have to tell their parent. And their parent is distressed and angry and upset and confused. And they're very angry that I know before then. And that their child hasn't been able to tell them. And I say, try not to take it personally. It's because your child is so upset about and worried about hurting you. They're worried about you worrying about them more. They already know you're worried about them. They're worried about that additional burden of putting that on you. It's not that they don't necessarily want you to notice it. They just don't want the additional pain of So hold that in mind, because that will then help you think about what your child needs. They need to feel that despite the fact that they are in this place, we still love and accept them, and that you believe that there is a way to do this together. And the research in self-harm is that actually young people want help and support from their community, not from mental health professionals, and that the young people who often do best after they've got illness and regular self-harming are the ones who get the most support from the people already in their lives, not from a professional. So what young people want is they want help from the people already in their lives. So it's finding a way of being able to do that together. And the way you can do that as a parent is you can find out more about what helps your child feel better. What are the things that help calm your child when they're distressed? Is it listening to music? Is it being with a pet? Is it being in nature? Is it being close to you and just watching TV? I don't want to talk about this, Mum, because we often want to talk about it when they don't. But I just want to be next to you and I just want to watch TV. I don't want to have to explain it. So when I work with families, we do something called a safety plan. And I work out with the young person what helps them when they feel distressed and overwhelmed. And often it is just, I just want to sit next to someone in my family and watch TV with them, or watch something on Netflix. I don't want to be on my own. I don't know how to tell anything like that. So it's working out a messaging with parents. How do you text message your mom to say, I just need to be with you right now, without saying that in so many words? So you might have an emoji out or something that you send your mom, and your mom knows, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm not going to make a big fuss. I'm not going to panic. Let's just go watch Netflix. And that's for families who are really stuck in that difficulty around self-harm. But yeah, it's very tough, and that's where it goes back to, you need your community as a parent. You need your support network. And in the UK, we have lots of support networks that are made up of other parents who are going with similar struggles. And we know 100% that's what helps parents through, is their community, the people around them. So one can become very isolated because there's a lot of shame attached to some of these difficult and a lot of stigma. And the sense that somehow you failed as a parent can be unbearable. So I would say, do not be afraid to reach out for help or build good, strong communities with other like-minded people who you can trust to support you. That's teaching your children something very important too. It's teaching their children that when struggling and they need help, there's not shape of interest. It's a brave thing, and it's the right thing, because as human beings, we're designed to live in tribal communities. We're designed to be connected to one another. We're designed to help them. So you're helping your young person learn, I don't have to be individual. I'm searching on the internet for someone that's going to make me feel better. I can reach out for help to my family, or I can reach out for help with, and it doesn't have to be just for parents or siblings. It can be an aunt, an uncle, the brother. Lots of grandparents are reading my book so that they can have stronger relationships with their grandchildren. They probably feel bad about some of the things that they might have done as a parent, and they want to do something different with their own children. And you can't underestimate the stress you're experiencing as a parent as you manage and juggle own high levels. You're managing relationship challenges and managing work. You're managing worries about money. You're managing worrying about your own self. And am I good enough? Am I good enough for my job? Am I good enough for partner? Am I good enough for mother? There's so much you're managing. So we think there's a lot here about self-compassion, not criticism, because I think we can get stuck in with blaming, self-criticism, and that transmits to our children. So we can do more talking aloud to ourselves, or like, okay, I messed this up, but there are so many things that I managed to get right. So it makes sense I messed it up. I'm really tired because I worked late last night. Give yourself a break, Beth. I'm teaching my daughter. She messes something up. It's not the end of the world. It's still part of life. And the more you're doing in your life, the more you're going to mess up. And that's okay, because it's part of growing and developing. And if you can give your children that sense of that messing up is about, it's learning from the messing up thing. And that's where going back to your children when you've messed up and saying, sorry, how can we do this differently next time? So by doing that, you're actually showing, I mess up, but how I learn. These men of that, it's great. It's great. Something you can learn from. So say sorry to your kids if you really mess back into them. Yeah, not sorry, but you shouldn't have done that. Exactly. Sorry. Own it. this is a beautiful thing. And you know what? Your child will apologize then. Your child will then not be afraid to own their debt, because a lot of mom, I talk about the shield of shame in the Bible, you know, when we're feeling shame about things, we get angry, we lie, we blame others. Is that and so if we say sorry, we're owning it, and we take the shield of shame away, and then our children are more likely to be able to tell us the truth. They're more likely to be able to say sorry. And then the upstairs and downstairs are very connected. We can have conversation less about thinking and feeling together and make sense of things and make plans about, these are mostly predictable problems. They happen similar times of day in every household. You have your triggers, your daughter has her triggers. They're the same triggers. So you can just get to know each other better and know that's a trigger for Mom. I'll try not to go there, you know. So it's kind of getting it on the table, understanding it, not being afraid of it, and then coming up with plans around how can we avoid this time of day when it goes wrong for us every morning, because all of our lids are flipped. What helps you keep your lid flipped? What helps you keep your lid not flipped? You know, connect it with what brings you back to feeling calm again. That might be something completely different from you and from your daughter. So we understand each other better, we understand ourselves better, and then we have less fear of things going wrong because we know how to repair that.
Exactly. Thank you so much for the conversation. So for the parents, learn to stay connected with your upstairs and downstairs with your kids, and believe in yourself as a parent and believe in your kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you.